Okay, let us get it. So we actually have like 3 different things in the calendar event here for today. We want to go over the content we have in this first subsection, mechanics of autopilot. These signals, okay, automaticity is older than consciousness, right? These signals often have shortcuts that affect behavior before they affect thought, and the thoughts they affect might be more complicated, unintuitive than thinking about them as merely sense data showing up in consciousness. And then we've got how the basal ganglia is involved. We've got reflexes. A lot of these are homeostatic. We've got motor skills, internalized information, right? Okay, so this is going to be the view of how the hippocampus internalizes. What was the compresses? Internalizes past experience. Then we have this adjudication marketplace, how the ventromedial prefrontal cortex uses dopamine to weigh competing drives. Yeah. Conflict monitoring. So we need to talk about these things. And then we also had monetization plan, which we could get going. Oh right, this was what was the TikTok on? I think this was going to be to watch other TikTok videos or other short form and see what they do. We could do that. And then we could watch videos, but then how to best mark stream moments via Stream Deck. So we've got those 3 things going on. Now, I might, cognitive biases, triune brain. Yo, what's good on you, Helen? If most people would barge into the front of a very long line if they knew there would be no consequences, does it prove that most people are not good in a virtuous sense, but are only good insofar as they are afraid of consequences? You could think of it that way. We could also just think of how our, like, all of our morals, all of our goodness is afforded to us by our social conditioning and social pressures. Now, the really cool thing is when people do act on, like, seemingly act on principle. Like they don't cut in those situations. That said, I guess cutting in a line, the problem with cutting in a line is it's so small scale that it's not that big of a deal. But if there was no ramifications for something more serious, it would be interesting to see how many people would end up doing that if they thought there was no consequences. But yeah, that's it. At the end of the day, we're just dealing with what our brain or conscience tells us we ought not to do. Like, it's just pushing back at us. This isn't always like we're hearing something consciously and then we're making a decision, but it's literally holding us back from even having the thought of possibly doing that. And even when we ponder it, it's going to make us feel in certain ways that make us less likely to do it. So that's really it. It's not just like we're moral in some objective way, but you could also that might make you think like, okay, then humans are like fundamentally bad. But then there's also this idea that even when there's no reason to do something good, people often do something good. And the question is, are they just doing that in order to feel good about themselves or for any other positive reason? And maybe that is always happening under the hood, but I don't think that it's helpful to just like paint humans as fundamentally good or bad here. The social pressure of not supporting the war effort in Germany in 1939. Huge. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Yeah, that would be wild to fight through that one. Okay, what was the short form marketing? Okay, that's a big deal. Should we do that? Okay, so I'm gonna be gone at least Monday and Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, probably Wednesday. So maybe we put that there. What is this? Taking recommendations we always keep. Distributed brain architecture. Habits of thought we just did. Oh, wait, what am I looking at right now? Oh, what am I doing right now? What did I just move? Did I just move this to the left? The mechanics of autopilot. Oh, I just moved this out. Okay. I don't know why I did that. I meant to do, I'm not going to be here these 3 days. So cognitive biases have to be later. Short form mark. Okay, I meant to do this. And then maybe we just push everything back here. Yeah, this works. Yeah, but this has to be fun. Ooh. Oh, taking okay, that's what we switch. Triune goes there. Cognitive, taking, cognitive, triune. Bada bing, bada boom. Roast. All right, we're there. Good morning, Burtbanes. What's good? What is poppin'? Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Okay, let's get these prompts going. Let's set us up. Trying to get a better understanding of what affects our automatic behaviors. Here are my notes. Next, we have, I have a Stream Deck, and I want the ability to set a marker during a stream such that I can easily find the markers after the fact. What is the best way of doing this? Gemini. Okay, the monetization plan, hopefully we have enough time for at the end of this, but that we want to spend more time with that one. And I'll probably want to think about that prompt more. Good morning. Heyo. All right, let's get to it. Let's get through the driest stuff here. To understand automaticity, we have to look at the brain as a hierarchy of efficiency. Your notes touch on the critical tension between metabolic conservation, doing things fast and cheap, and cognitive flexibility, doing things right. So the basement reflex arcs and the basement, okay, reflex arcs and autonomic regulators. The most rigid programs don't even require the brain to act. Perfect, that's where we want to start. So reflex arcs and autonomic regulators. This is the reflexive spectrum. Now is this what people even talk about? No, no one's calling it this. So let's just say these are reflexes. That's intuitive. All right, spinal reflexes, perfect. Wonderful. The thalamic gate. The thalamus acts as the switchboard. It uses pre-attentive processing to filter out static data, like the feeling of your socks. If your thalamus didn't gate this, you're going. Okay, this is high up here. I don't know why we're talking about this. Leading to combinatorial explosion, where you couldn't focus on a single goal. Okay, so let's not deal with that one right now. We got the efficiency engine. We got efficiency, which probably would be the next topic. And this guy's already here. What is the main tagline, though? If the spinal cord handles hardwire reflexes, the basal ganglia handles learned reflexes. Beautiful. Chunking. Metabolic gating. This is evolutionarily efficient by offloading repetitive motor patterns to the basal ganglia. The brain frees up the prefrontal cortex for high-level monitoring. So the question is, how does the basal ganglia remember, in a sense? Or is that not the way that we should think about it? Is it simply just the architecture of the basal ganglia like includes or represents the entirety of these actions that it can choose in response to whatever is happening? So whatever input comes in, it'll effectively pragmatically just activate the actions or the procedures, the responses that put other parts of the brain or body in motion. The neuroplasticity link. Through repetition, the synaptic pathways in the basal ganglia become so efficient that they require very little ignition to fire. They become prepotent responses. Behaviors so dominant, they occur automatically unless actively inhibited. Okay, this was a separate thing that I think that was here. Okay, yeah, and then we would want to talk about adjudication as a separate, as the next topic. Adjudication. What adjudicates competing drives? All right, Choff 1. Yo. All right, let me gank that for real quick. Birdbanes program via repetitive and sequential actions for specific tasks. Right. I think playing the piano, fast-paced sports, skating, and handling the hockey stick at the same time, while not getting roughed up too badly. Yeah, I would want to know if it's just like yesterday we were talking about the hippocampus and how we crystallize memories over time, and how the hippocampus kind of holds short-term memories, and then it reprocesses those whether we're at rest or while we sleep, and that effectively affects our long-term learning throughout the brain, but the hippocampus just has that small role. So I'm wondering if similar to how long-term memories are stored across the cortex, across the frontal cortex, is it the case that like that the basal ganglia like store these like input-output sequences? Your brain can't handle all that input and command to action consciously. Right. It has to be pre-programmed. All right. What is this? Joff, I'm giving you all the trust of a live send. All right, stop babysitting your terminal. Game character voice lines, the instant Claude code, codex cursor, open code finishes or needs permission. Never lose flow to a silent terminal again. Wait.
Ready to work. Something need doing? Work.
All right, so, okay, what's actually happening here? So it's going out, it's doing the thing. And then what, when it's done, it's just going to say that? Oh, I see. Approve. Okay, Clucky's working. So this is an interface for using any of these coding or agent AIs, and it involves talking to you. So, to hear that one, to scroll down to hear that one, it adds voice lines to Claude's stages. I've yet to use Claude for like more advanced coding, and perhaps I should, though. You know, I usually don't like to code outside of work.
Off I go then.
Not human peasant?
Yes, Commander.
That's sick.
Engineering.
Make it happen. In the game.
Oh, StarCraft. Okay. Are these all StarCraft? Oh, these are okay. These are all Team 4. Okay, these are all from games. Wow. What was the
Sentry going up.
very nice. Pick your packs. Oh my gosh, there's more. Will I recognize? Oh, we got to get an Ocarina of Time going.
Hello.
What? That would get pretty annoying pretty quickly. Tony Soprano.
Hey, it's me. What are you doing? Hey, it's me. What are you doing?
Okay. Yeah, this would freak me out. I don't know if I don't know if I want my terminal talking to me. No job's done. If only an orc could say identifying the rascal. Ooh, I don't know what that's from. I'm too out of the gaming scene here. There's human peasants in Warcraft 3? I guess that makes sense.
You're the king? Well, I didn't vote for you.
Very cool. Is that? I'm guessing this is a character from one of these games. I want some like some Banjo Kazooie sounds. Like it's not even a word, but they're just making noises whenever it's ready. I think that would be my go-to. It's from your stream. Uh-oh, I have to brush up on my Stan lore. Oh no. I don't even remember what that's from. An orc say identifying the rascal. How long ago was this? From the time you asked ChatGPT about the Amiibo. Oh, okay. Identifying the rascal. Right. Yep. Okay, now I remember it. But there was no orc involved, right? We're just adding the orc part here. Why not get the Star Trek Cars system? Ooh, I'm not sure what that is. The orcs from Warcraft, I believe. Okay. Yeah, it would be cool to get some more stuff going on in the stream. Maybe just start having characters talking to us at random moments. Yo, the director. Are you also interested in literature, films, arts, or do you completely exist in the philosophical scientific world? Outside of the stream, I am quite interested in pop culture. I don't know how much of that would be literature, though. I'm pretty out of literature. I feel like there's just so much. Films, though, I don't know. I try to keep up on films, but I need to watch more. Oh, identifying the rascal. There it is. Where would this be? Can I just like put this into Gemini and see what it says? Right, then, okay, the response was identifying the rascal there. Identifying the rascal. What? Oh, okay. So, and then that became the stream summary title, right? Something like that. That's hilarious.
So they don't know what it is, right? Is that what this is? They're trying to identify the rascal? What he's saying.
Oh, okay. It never showed up in the clip. All right. The orcs are always involved, but they operate in secret. Okay. The arts. I kind of try to stay up with music, but that's a huge scene as well. I mean, really, it's just I listen to whatever shows up on Spotify Discovered. And I'm usually spending a lot of time following politics, even though I don't do that on this channel. But that's been the sad part of my life these days. Okay, the Star Trek computer. Okay, I used to have that for my 15-year-old iMac back in the day. Very cool. Would that be just for the terminal? Skip to 20 seconds. What do you mean with pop culture? I just like what's going on. Just what people are saying. Like I'll check out, well, so I guess I'll read like, I don't know, Morning Brew. I'll check out the Out of the Loop subreddit. I'll check out that Faux Moi subreddit. I'll check out just popular, like the popular section on Reddit. I'll check out YouTube, see what's going on. Sometimes I hit that category for things that I haven't seen, or they really make it hard on YouTube these days to like see what is popular outside of what it thinks you're gonna like. It took quite a bit of effort to plug in the sound alerts for tasks. Pretty sure they should have a L-Cars overlay for some AI with the same intent. Okay. Stay on r/politics farming all the for politics. I tried not to get all my news from Reddit. Pop culture I try to get from Reddit because I feel like those like Reddit people are in the know in terms of random pop culture stuff. But politics, you got to be careful with Reddit. I found that it's best right now to find people that you trust on like Substack, and then also on YouTube as well. Reading up on the Atlantic. Now, I guess I haven't been doing like actual news places. The cool thing with like a Substack is you know that they don't have like an incentive structure. They're not working for a company. They literally just have these like donations, the subscriptions, and that's it. And then I guess I was checking on ground news a lot. But that was pretty much it. All right, the utility metric. Axis of the okay, use dopamine. Right. This is all stuff that we just have in here. Reflexes, right. Let's get that down there. So let's see if we can get some nice form of motors. Okay, motor skills. How much of this is... Did this even talk about motor skills? Motor response? Motor patterns? Whoops. So let's keep this as something still quote-unquote outstanding. We have internalizing information. What did it call it here? Internalization. We can't call it internalization because internalization kind of encompasses everything we're talking about here. Adjudication mark. So I really want, maybe we go one at a time here. to figure out how we're supposed to think about these topics. Because right now it's just spitting back my notes at me, which is not ideal. Maybe I even stop using these notes. What was this, conflict monitoring? This was part of the adjudication here. The thalamus is gating conscious experience. Why would we do that? For example, if you are blind to the feeling of your socks on your feet right now because the thalamus has automatically gated that signal out to save processing power. Oh, this was part of that energy efficiency topic. Oh, okay. Yeah, so let's start fresh. I don't even want to use that. I try not to read opinion pieces on politics, just want the facts of what's going on, like the scam that is bored of peace. Yeah, the tricky thing though is that a lot of the time you need to trust whoever's going to piece the right facts together. Like, it's not as clear cut as just seeing the facts. And I think a lot of people do just feel like, on all sides, I think people just think that there are facts and then, you know, that's it. And whoever just has the facts are going to be right. But it's you really need someone who's going to piece these facts together in a narrative that makes sense, but also abides by all these other like complex norms or moral norms that you care about. So, yeah. It depends what value they're going, like they have in their mind when they're writing the piece, because a lot of times people can have the same facts and they you know, they curve the facts in whatever direction they want to go in, or whatever conclusion they want. You know, we saw that recently with how people might have seen a similar video, perhaps the same video, and came away with different conclusions. So the question is, like, how much are they presupposing in their interpretation? Slate Star Codex. That Windows sound messaged my ears. Different pitch. There are no facts, only different interpretations. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to say there's no facts, because that would be pretty unintuitive for people. But there's interpretations of the facts, and facts, you could say, are interpretations as well. Like when you're, you know, just at the smallest scale, when you're dealt with a bunch of matter, you can interpret that in many different ways, potentially, but obviously you are predisposed to interpret it in a certain way. So, yeah, when you're dealt with these facts, you might want to consider how you might be able to interpret them in ways that you don't automatically or initially interpret them. But yeah, April is when we get into that stuff. April is when we do rationality, we do reasons, we do all this more fun stuff than the stuff that we are doing this month. Even though this stuff is actually really neat soon. Like when we get to our survival heuristics and cognitive biases, like that is fun enough for a video at least. The pen, we got to get the pen. 2 pens. All right, what do we want? All right, I'm trying to consider the topic of automatic behaviors. The topic and underlying mechanisms of automatic behaviors. I think perhaps the most fundamental starting point would be to talk about reflexes and autonomic regulators. What do you think? Is there anything more basic than that? I form my own opinion by reading the board's stupid charter. What is the board here? Because I noticed you said the board. That is Board of Peace. Oh, is there a thing called the Board of Peace? And you're saying that the Board of Peace has a stupid charter? How the CEO holds all the power, no legitimate enforcement powers, no legitimacy in mobilizing military after the CEO leaves office. Those powers, for example, remain with whoever is the new president, etc. Board of Peace. So who is the Board of Peace? Been reading about Thomas Jefferson, the Board of Peace. I'm so lost here. I'm so out of my element. About Thomas Jefferson, the Board of Peace. What is the Board of Peace? All right, I don't think I'm gonna look it up because I wanna stay in this mindset here. Okay, starting with reflexes and autonomic regulators is a logically sound approach. In the hierarchy of automaticity, these represent the most immediate interface between the environment and the body's hardware. However, if you want to identify the absolute most basic mechanism, the foundation upon which reflexes and autonomic systems are built, you have to look at electrochemical equilibrium and action potential. Oh my gosh, we're going that low. The action potential, simple reflex arc. Most basic circuit. It is essentially a hardwired shortcut that bypasses the brain entirely to save. Okay, you know what? Let's entertain this. So we're definitely not going as deep as the action potential. We already have that. By the time you get to this point in the document, you'll already know what an action potential is. Before a reflex can occur, a single neuron must be automated to fire. This is governed by the all or nothing principle. Once a stimulus reaches a specific voltage threshold, the cell must fire. There is no conscious decision at the cellular level. It's just a chemical interaction. Actually, in this case, it's just a... it's still chemical, right? It's just I mean, it's an electrical reaction, but I think these are just... Or should I say they're molecular? What's the difference between like talking about molecules and chemicals? What's the difference between talking about molecular interactions and chemical interactions? It depends on the level of granularity you're looking for, specifically whether you're discussing the physical arrangement of molecules or the rearrangement of their internal structures. So in many scientific contexts, the terms overlap, but they represent two distinct ways of understanding how matter behaves. So molecular interactions refer to the forces that act between stable molecules, and chemical reactions refer to the forces that hold atoms together within a molecule. When we talk about a chemical interaction in the context of a interaction in the context of a reaction, we're talking about the making or breaking of these bonds. So then this would be a molecular interaction, right? Because these aren't changing. Though I imagine there are chemical reactions happening at the same time. Founded this year. The Board of Peace was founded this year. Okay. Slowly getting a little more. Think car on the highway and kids in the car. Now I'm even farther away from what I thought. This is a riddle. This is a riddle of some sort. Does Board of Peace... First of all, it's a bop. That's kind of sick. Board of Peace. Does it sound like anything? Peace board? No, I'm still lost. All right. This is purely the protein structures. Okay, this is right. This is purely a result of protein structures, ion channels, right? Responding to voltage charges. It is the binary code of the nervous system, right? But then what's going on here? Moving up one level, you reach the monosynaptic reflex. This is the most basic circuit. It is essentially a hardwired shortcut that bypasses the brain entirely to save time. So you got a sensory neuron, goes straight to the spinal cord synapse to the motor neuron. Is it really that quick? Literally neuron and neuron and neuron? It doesn't require processing in a patellar reflex, knee jerk. The muscle is stretched and the signal travels to the spinal cord and immediately triggers a contraction. Okay, so that's kind of what we're here. Or that's what we're talking about here. We've got spinal reflexes. These are I think that's the pathway. It doesn't require processing. Whoops. And it certainly doesn't require conscious experience. Modern neuroscience views this as the primitive layer of the nervous system, evolutionarily ancient and functionally rigid. All right, so I'm going to just say, okay, is this apt for reflexes? Or am I off in some way, in any way? All right, then we've got autonomic regulators, homeostasis, right? This is kind of what we wanted to talk about. Actually, before we get to autonomic regulators, which I think is kind of going on here. This is talking about efficiency. Autonomic regulators. Maybe efficiency should really be a discussion to be had at this level. A discussion of efficiency. Like, efficiency should be the theme that is overarching regardless of what we say throughout this section. So homeostasis, though, is an important topic to bring up. If it helps, Donnie Boy is the CEO for life of this board. Okay, I see. So we're talking about the US of A. Originally thought to displace the UN Security Council on international peacekeeping, according to some alarmists on the news, but actually lacks legitimacy upon looking up and projecting how it will actually function. The car and kids analogy was meant for the for the molecular versus chemical interactions portion of your earlier question. Molecular being cars and chemical being the kids in the car. I see. So when we're talking about ionic, what was it? Ion channels? Ion channels? When we're talking about ion channels, when we're talking ion channels and the interaction of an action potential, is it apt to call this simply electrical or molecular or electrochemical or chemical or etc.? Okay, this is more homeostatic regulators. And then it seems like homeostasis is an encompassing topic, which bridges us from the direct reflexes to more sophisticated processing. all happening under this overarching interpretation of homeostasis. This is what I'm thinking about. Oh, why do we have... The reader will have surface level of the global neural workspace, so it's important to point out how many of these stimulus response mechanisms bypass conscious experience via shortcuts. Okay, that's fine. That's good. So I might throw that out first. But it's good that we have this stuff now. Nice, the hypothalamus and the brainstem, right? And I'm going to ask a question here. When we say the spinal cord, is this a flow through the vagus nerve? I need to know that. Okay, autonomic regulators, homeostasis. While reflexes are often event-driven, you touch a hot stove, autonomic regulators are state-driven. These are the background processes managed primarily by the hypothalamus and the brainstem. They operate on negative feedback loops. If blood pressure drops, baroreceptors signal the brainstem, which automatically increases heart rate to... Oh, I see, I see. So when I'm talking about homeostasis, I need to be more careful. And maybe just say allostasis, because this is talking more about like homeostatic responses. The automatic nature, these are distinct because they are tonically active. While a reflex is usually off until triggered, your autonomic system is always on, constantly modulating your internal environment. Beautiful. And that would be like the next thing to talk about. So let's not talk about the spectrum. Let's talk about homeostatic regulators. Let's get this in there. This is all under this topic. Oh, nice. This leads us all the way up to that part. Is there anything more basic? If you want to go deeper than the action potential, you enter the realm of biophysics and thermodynamics. Hell no. So we've got that. I wanted also to steal these guys. These guys are good. So this is, okay, we got, these are the most rigid programs affecting our baseline arousal before we even see the world. Same barriers that never reach. Okay. This is the spinal cord stuff. These homeostatic regulators are involuntary behaviors driven by the autonomic nervous system. Right. The reader will have, okay. Yep. The spinal cord handles hardwired reflexes. The basal ganglia handles learned reflexes. Okay, so that needs to come in there. But I could bring that up. I'm probably going to ask that next after we go through this, after we go through these guys. So maybe this is like going to be the next thing I say. Learned reflexes. Yeah, we can't just like start talking about energy conservation here. This type of talk needs to happen at the beginning here. Think F1 drivers and how little reaction time they actually have to make snap changes to speed, direction, etc. Those are simply those aren't simply reflexes. They have to be enhanced with sudden last-minute input that the conscious brain may or may not be actually aware of. Right. So that's what we're talking about with those. It includes context and some level of processing that may or may not become conscious. And that would be something like learned reflexes. Because, yeah, to say that you're incorporating context into your decision, even unconsciously, is, I would say, tantamount to saying that type of reflex was learned. Because you can't just use context that you haven't... Like, context implies you understand some significance of it, even unconsciously. So you know, this is learned in the sense, learned in the most, I don't know, in an unconscious sense. I'll just say that. All right. Lines with the consensus in nearby. You're correctly identifying the hierarchy of automaticity. However, there are two specific technical points to correct to ensure your programs are accurate. One regarding the vagus nerve and one regarding blinking. All right, the vagus nerve versus the spinal cord. You asked if the spinal cord flows through the vagus nerve. It does not. Spinal reflexes. These use spinal nerves, part of the somatic nervous system, that enter and exit the spinal cord at specific segments. The vagus nerve, this is part of the autonomic nervous system, specifically the parasympathetic branch. It bypasses the spinal cord entirely, traveling directly from the brainstem to the visceral organs. Huh. If I were to just look up the autonomic nervous system, do I get a picture? Do I get a nice picture? Like, why does this look like it's going down the spinal cord? Am I going crazy?
Professor.
Whoa. Oh man, this is so tough. This is the spinal cord, right? Oh, nice. All right. I think I'm gonna have to read this one. I would say consciousness is merely an overlay over a more complex input-output processing organ. Saba kind of true. Right. Yeah, yeah. That the question is like, what's the best metaphor for this? So it's not just an overlay because it's actually affected by these underlying things. So it isn't something separate. It's just like a subset. Like consciousness is just like you could think of it as a subset of all this processing, all this more fundamental processing. And it's truly beholden to the underlying processing. It's not that consciousness has like some power over the rest. Thinking in words is hella slow for processing purposes. Right. Even thinking in words like unconsciously, which is a weird topic to think about, but all right. Oh, I never looked at this. All right, when discussing ion channels and action potentials, the most precise and widely accepted term is electrochemical. Okay. I think that's actually what I started with, but I know that the like synapse communication is, I imagine that's I thought that was more electrochemical as well, but I guess it's all electrochemical. It's just that with this, you're actually dealing with neurotransmitters, which are like those Maybe that is just chemical as opposed to electrical, but they're still carrying some sort of charge. I don't know. While electrical or molecular might describe pieces of the process, they're incomplete on their own. The action potential is a phenomenon where electrical signals are generated specifically through the movement of chemical species, ions, across a molecular structure of the channel. So, right, it's the movement of these ions across a membrane. Right, so then when talking about neurotransmitters across a synapse, are we also talking electrochemical? Like, what's the difference here? Okay, in the context of the synapse, the term chemical becomes the primary descriptor, while the cause and result of the synaptic event are electrochemical. The transmission across the gap is a chemical process. To be precise, synaptic transmission is the point where the electrochemical signal is converted into a chemical signal, which is then converted back into an electrochemical signal in the next neuron. Translation process, think of the synapse as a gap between two electrical circuits that are not physically touching. To get the signal across, you have to change the medium. Right. So it reaches the end of the axon. This electrical change triggers voltage-gated calcium channels to open. So these ions, the influx of these calcium ions is an electrochemical event, but its purpose here is to trigger the release of neurotransmitter molecules. So the cleft, this is a purely chemical transmission. So the neurotransmitters like glutamate, GABA, or dopamine are released into the gap. Electricity no longer plays a direct role. They move via diffusion. This is a molecular chemical interaction. The neurotransmitter acts as a ligand, a key moving through a fluid to find its receptor, a lock. Okay. Now, what would you what would we describe? How would we describe the force that affects the diffusion of neurotransmitters? Is that not electromagnetic at all? And then the postsynaptic membrane, this is back to electrochemical, causes an ion channel to open. Right. Yo, Energy Dompter, what's good? I'm now sympathetic to cubism. Nice. Did we go into I think we did go into cubism once, but I'm not sure if I recall it. Are you able to provide a succinct summary, perhaps in relation to some of these other ones? All right, diffusion is driven by entropy, but the interactions that facilitate it are fundamentally electromagnetic. When you zoom in on a neurotransmitter floating across a synapse, you aren't seeing a force pulling it in a specific direction like gravity. Instead, you're seeing the result of a statistical drunkard's walk called Brownian motion. So the force is actually thermal energy. Diffusion is not caused by a single directional force. It is caused by thermal energy. At any temperature above absolute zero, molecules are vibrating and zipping around. So is it just random movement? But they're the cleft is like shaped in such a way that it's more likely it's going to end up at the other end. These collisions are random. Over time, this randomness naturally spreads the molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Wow. Okay, so this is certainly why a lot of neurotransmitters can get lost or leak out the sides of the cleft. Almost every interaction in biology is electromagnetic. When a water molecule hits a neurotransmitter molecule, they don't actually touch like two billiard balls. Instead, the electron clouds of the water molecule and the neurotransmitter molecule get close, like charges repel. The negative electrons of one push against the negative electrons of the other. Okay. Even though the underlying physics is electromagnetic, scientists rarely use that term for diffusion because most neurotransmitters and the fluid they move through are locally charge balanced. There isn't a massive electrical field pulling, so there's no extra pull here. Okay, that was a random aside that I think was beneficial for me to understand. Are they referring to conductivity? Oh. I'm not sure. I'd imagine that the chemicals are conductive. If there was a significant force, they would be affected by it. But maybe not if it's just chemical and not electrochemical. All right, cubism is an interpretation of quantum physics, which believes that probabilities related to the wave equation are subjective beliefs about what we predict in the future experience, and that consciousness actively causes the wave function to collapse. It believes that the probabilities related to the wave equation are subjective beliefs about what we predict in future experiences, and that consciousness actively causes the wave function to collapse. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm probably going to be hesitant on that one just because I really don't like the idea of conflating our subjective experience with what quantum physics seems to be describing. Even though there's like an intuitive similarity there, I don't think it's appropriate. All right, talking about membrane equilibrium. Talking about membrane equilibrium. What is good, Dharmadam? We might have been talking about that. That could have been the case, given that there is no force operating on these. But just involves electromagnetic force. Right. Yeah, I was curious about the wording of how we're supposed to describe neurotransmitters versus the ions within the neuron. And yeah, I was kind of blown away that there is no force there's no there's no field that pushes the neurotransmitters from one side of the synapse to the other. It's really just dynamics of diffusion, just like them bouncing off of each other and they just happen to get there. Like it's like they're all moving randomly and they just end up crossing. That makes them cross the synaptic cleft. Well, it is a tiny, tiny space. That is true. Right? Yep, I imagine there's still some leakage. Okay. I don't think I'm going to want to go too much more deep into chemistry here. But that was cool. Okay, the vagus nerve versus the spinal cord. The distinction: if you hit your knee, the signal stays in the spinal cord. If your brain triggers a decrease in heart rate, the signal travels via the vagus nerve. They are two separate wiring systems. All right, refining the reflexive spectrum. Your draft is all right, but let's sharpen the blinking and homeostasis. Okay, so then when talking about reflexes, is it the case that these signals are moving more more quickly through the spinal cord? Or is it simply the case that anything involving the vagus nerve is dealing with context or state? I should just say state. Some interoceptive state. Thus, putting it in the category of homeostatic. Okay, out of curiosity, since to my understanding you're interested in embodied cognition, can we react to this video? Can we react to this video on embodied cognition? Oh, it is kind of long though. Quantum Bayesianism and the embodied agent. We can react to the summary of it potentially today, depending on how long we take, because we do have a lot to do still. So let's try to get through this stuff as quickly as we possibly can. I might have to finish this type of discussion on my own. I'm not sure. All right, we're finding the reflexive spectrum. Let's sharpen the blinking and homeostasis sections for rigor. Blinking. Be careful categorizing blinking as spinal. And we did that. Blink. Okay, we try to keep this in the homeostatic section here. Blinking is a cranial reflex. The signal goes to the pons, the brainstem, not to the spinal cord. It is still automatic and bypasses the cortex, but the hardware is different. Okay. Homeostasis versus allostasis. Yep. Homeostasis is reactive, shivering because you are already cold. Allostasis is predictive, increasing heart rate before you stand up because the brain anticipates the need for blood flow. So even though it might be, these discussions are still allostatic, really we're trying to look at, you know, the homeostatic aspect of these. Homeostatic regulators are more rigid, right? Allostatic regulators are more sophisticated because they involve internal models of the world, right? Right. Okay. Integration, yep. Spinal and autonomic reflexes are sub-threshold for the workspace. The motor output happens via local circuit, right? All right, this is, we can put that there. You're correct that the signal eventually reaches the brain. By the time the ignition happens, you feel the pain, the motor program is already finished. This is why you jump before you scream. The feeling is a post hoc report of a completed action. Okay, is this all I said? Or all I thought? Speed of spinal versus vagus. It isn't necessarily that signals move faster through the spinal cord than the vagus nerve. It's that they are traveling on different types of cables for different purposes. Okay. Spinal reflexes. The sprinting fibers. These typically use type A alpha or A beta fibers. These are heavily myelinated, insulated, and are the fastest conducting fibers in the body up to that. Evolution prioritized speed here because these reflexes protect you from immediate physical trauma. All right, this is all good stuff. And then this is, okay, that's there. The vagus nerve. The vagus nerve consists mostly of type C fibers and some type B fibers. They are much slower. All right, so then I'm just trying to make sense of how how to connect these dots here. Spinal reflexes are physically faster because they use the high-speed rail cables. Yep. Because your heart rate or digestion rarely needs to change in a fraction of a millisecond. Interoceptive and vagus nerve. You are right. Okay, you're on the point. The vagus nerve is the great interoceptor. I know this is not like the way that okay, I'm just gonna say is for interoception. Vagus as a state monitor. Yep. Are sensory. They aren't sending commands to the organs. They are sending status reports from the organs to the brain. That's cool. Because the vagus nerve reports on the internal state, it is the primary actor in the homeostatic allostatic loop. It tells the brain. Okay. So. Okay, so connecting this discussion of the spinal cord to the, you know what, let's get the chat GPT transcription. Okay. So connecting this discussion of the spinal cord versus the vagus nerve to the past discussion that we had about creating some sort of hierarchy of these mechanics of our automatic behaviors. At the bottom level, we have the reflex arcs. We're looking at that through the lens of spinal reflexes, which are quite quick and are quite authoritative. Then we were looking at autonomic regulators, looking at homeostasis, which involves a little bit more of reacting to state, internal state. I'd imagine that, I guess, spinal reflexes might react to internal state as well. So I'm trying to figure out perhaps what the difference here is. And we simply have more players in this topic of homeostasis that might involve more processing. We talked about the hypothalamus and the brainstem. We talked about the vagus nerve. We're talking about more sophisticated regulations. Yeah, how do I make sense of all these? All right, let's see if that's good enough. Okay, it's about purpose and integration. To build the hierarchy, think of it as a move from fixed point reaction to system-wide orchestration. That's what we would want to do. And that's kind of what we want to build a hierarchy. Let's think of it as a move from that to that. All right. Bottom level, we got the spinal. These are the closed loop. Right. These are closed loops. These are essentially if-then statements hard-coded into the hardware of the spinal cord. Beautiful. That's what we want. The different spinal reflexes are primarily localized and motor focused. They protect specific limbs or muscle groups. Perfect. This is the type of context we want. While you're right that they technically react to a state, that state is almost always mechanical and external to the core vital organs. They are authoritative because they don't wait for a status report from the rest of the body. If the tendon is stretched, the muscle must contract. We don't have to go too deep. Like, this should literally be like 2 paragraphs. And then we move on to the next thing. Like, we really don't need to know this much about, or too much more, I should say, about, like, spinal reflexes. But it's certainly important to include the middle level autonomic regulators, the integrated loop. When you move to the brainstem, hypothalamus, and the vagus nerve, the automaticity becomes much more complex because it has to balance competing needs. So a spinal reflex cares about one thing, the muscle. A homeostatic regulator has to care about everything. Oxygen levels, blood, okay. All right, nice, look at that. CO2, everything. Can I just gut the formatting here? There we go. Think of the hypothalamus as the master thermostat. It receives data from the vagus nerve and the bloodstream. Then it decides which program to run. So first we would want to talk about the vagus nerve. Then we would want to talk about the hypothalamus. Okay, homeostatic regulators would be the first thing we would want to talk about. Okay, if A, B, C, D, E are met, do this. If A, B, C, E, F, then do this. Okay, that's integrating different state and doing some sort of processing. This is still very simple processing, but it's some sort of processing where you're integrating different inputs into some sort of output. And this is going to be a discussion about probably, yeah, we're going to have to get to the basal ganglia, which is the basal ganglia making these decisions? That's the question. Okay. The vagus highway, unlike the high speed, yep, the vagus nerve is more like a massive data fiber optic cable. It's not just sending a jerk command, it's sending a constant stream of telemetry. Oh, I see, I see. All right. And then oh, okay, so this puts brainstem vagus at homeostatic. And then once we get to hypothalamus cortex, we get to prediction. Once we incorporate the cortex, now we're talking allostasis. All right. This is now integrating internal plus external. All right. Okay, so what determines what... Okay, no, I should say... Okay, so do the basal ganglia determine what to do given a set of input streams? Almost always disregarding what the mind registers. I don't know if it would be disregarding what the mind registers, because I think that top-down signals do affect what is interpreted from these. Like, it's going to affect, if this is right. Okay, yes, this is right, the basal ganglia. I think top-down signals would affect how the basal ganglia interprets what's going on. I could be wrong about that. If only we could get rid of that pesky mind. Very nice. But, you know, once again, the mind is much more than, I think, what meditation practices can get rid of. I guess, yeah, I guess when we think about the mind, we think about consciousness, but there's a lot coming from the, the cortex or the frontal cortex that I think is still involved here. Once again, we can't think about the brain using the triune model. It's not that like the cortex is this extra thing that is being added on top of this whole like this whole system that we've just been discussing so far. These things are much interconnected, and they they evolved to be that way. All right. So then, all right, spinal and autonomic reflexes are sub-threshold for the workspace. So this is a discussion to happen later. This is like the conscious aspect of, actually, I don't know what we're trying to get at here. We could talk about allostasis after this. Allostasis. All right, learned reflexes. This is all going to happen before that. Oh, and adjudication needs to happen before that. And then, as we discussed yesterday, consciousness has to come up before we talk about internalization via the hippocampus, because much of this internalization requires that level of conscious experience. So it would be something like this here. Learned reflexes would need to come before a discussion of allostasis, because what type of prediction can you have without learned? And it would actually be that very topic, that very same topic. I feel like adjudication should come before learned reflexes. I don't know, this is tricky now. I was thinking more about science discounting consciousness, but I don't like the word mind anyway. It is vague. Yeah, fair enough. Right, science discounting consciousness. Yeah, it's just, I guess it's hard to, like, at this point we kind of know that consciousness is, or I'm gonna act as if we know this. We know that consciousness is affected by this distributed network, but we don't really know like how different parts of the brain contribute to consciousness in like exact ways. We kind of have an idea, but really we're making guesses. But really we already see what's going on in terms of just information processing. So yeah, it's easy to just kind of throw consciousness out of the window here, which is kind of fine. In terms of processing speeds, the consciousness is just too slow in registering and changing course. Also, why visual thinking is faster. Right, but the one thing that we need to keep in mind is that top-down signals do not equal consciousness. Consciousness is a manifestation of both top-down and bottom-up signals, and like a subset of those signals. And top-down signals affect these types of processes, these type of low-level processes in ways that are quite unconscious. So we can't disregard how much our memory and other aspects of context affect interpretation even of interoceptive states. This doesn't have to be conscious for us to think about predictive processing. Pattern recognition would be fatally impaired if we relied on conscious registering of inputs. Right. I think it's a little reductive, but it is beneficial to think about consciousness as an output of what's going on in the brain, and it's one in which an experience of something will affect processing in the brain, just in the same sense that those signals would have affected processing in the brain regardless. But they are made conscious because of the types of activity that those signals affect. Not sure how other people do it, but I run scenarios in my mind ahead of time all the time, so it speeds up processing time rather than let me deliberate over what to do when an incoming car is 2 seconds in front of me. Yeah, I think that's a great idea to do. That's a effective strategy, because you are literally priming your brain to be able to effectively make those decisions more quickly. Energy Dompter, a reason I recommended you that video related to cubism is because if you're interested in embodied cognition, you might be interested in how that integrates with contemporary physics theories. Right, but like once again, I think if they're going to try to connect embodied cognition to quantum physics, I'm guessing with like 85% certainty that they're going to do something inappropriate. Like, embodied cognition is not a description of quantum physics. So I'm not sure how they're going to, do that magic. But we could see. We'll see. All right, if the spinal cord is the emergency responder and the brainstem is the utility manager, the basal ganglia is the executive referee. All right, so then we can talk about the PFC as some sort of adjudicator for competing drives. And then finally, and then we can talk about conscious. I don't even know if we need to talk about conscious experience now that I think about it. Yeah, no, I think that would be fine. And then going even higher, we can talk about. Now let's say conscious experience and memory through a discussion of how the hippocampus compresses, internalizes past experience, affecting future automatic processing. So in the end, I have these topics in the following order. We've got boom. We've got boom. We got reflexes. We got homeostasis. We've got learned reflexes. This is going to be allowing us to now talk about allostasis, adjudication, ACC and VM as involved in adjudication. All right, adjudication, conscious experience, long-term memory. Is this an appropriate ordering of these topics. Am I missing a significant topic here? And what else should I consider about this telling? So that this is appropriate, modern, and comprehensive. Okay. Also works when you have an arsenal of witty repartee. When someone shoots snarky remarks at you, it's all ready to unload. Right, and a lot of that, it does help having actual, not muscle memory, but like having actual habits of being able to make those types of remarks. Like, you know, I'm very bad at that stuff. I was never a quick, witty comeback type person. Usually because I'm like nice to people, and I think that you know, I get many fewer jokey slights than the average person. So I'm just not equipped for that. But I don't think if I were to like think of these, like maybe I would be like fine enough. But I would need the muscle memory of, or I would need the, you know, actual training of doing that over and over again, actually making those remarks. Response is almost instant. Are you gonna get AI to test you? Good fun. We could. I just don't know what the topic should be for that type of thing. Like, I guess we could do it at the end of this conversation. We could have that test in there, and that does help you remember, of course. Your proposed hierarchy is sound and aligns with the bottom-up neurobiological approach. You're essentially tracing the path from the hardwired hardware to software that writes itself. To make this modern and comprehensive, there are a few architectural adjustments and one major missing topic you should consider: the thalamus. Okay, so we actually had the thalamus somewhere, but we decided not to do it. Okay, maybe not. Maybe we just had that one. Oh no, we did talk about it here. Discussion of the thalamus as gating conscious experience. And the distinction between implicit versus explicit memory. Here is a refined look at your hierarchy with the necessary modern nuances. All right, emphasize that these are non-representational. They don't think about the world. Right, yep, we have that. Allostasis in the basal ganglia, learned automaticity. This is where reflex becomes habit. Missing link, dopamine. You cannot talk about the basal ganglia without dopamine. Do we have dopamine already here? We have dopamine down here, but I don't think we have dopamine up here. You cannot talk. It is the value signal that tells the basal ganglia which automatic behaviors are worth keeping. Well, okay. I mean, if we're talking about learning, then we're talking about dopamine, so I don't know if we're going to need to have a separate discussion of dopamine. Unless dopamine is actually affecting the processing in the moment, then I don't think it's going to matter. Because we're going to talk about, you know, neuroplasticity, and we've already thoroughly discussed how dopamine is involved in long-term potentiation. So I think we're not going to need to, like, talk about dopamine a ton there. Thaw the moose. We're thawing a moose? Thaw the moose. Is this another riddle? All right, the sensory gate, the thalamus, the missing topic. Before you get to the ACC or the PFC, almost every piece of data must pass through the thalamus. Why it matters for automaticity. The thalamus decides what is noise and what is signal. If you are focused on a task, the thalamus mutes the automatic sensory data of the shirt touching your skin. This is the first level of attention that happens before conscious experience. Before conscious experience. Whoa. So this is an aspect of adjudication, essentially. So this is like competing drives. This is a less fundamental topic. Okay, so is it apt to talk about the thalamus within the adjudication topic? My concern was that what the thalamus lets through tends to become conscious, and if we are in that adjudication section, then we are still pre-conscious experience according to how I had set this thing up. Perhaps I should have set it up in a different way such that we could talk about the thalamus earlier. In my mind, it seems like the thalamus is one of the more fundamental adjudicators. But perhaps it's only adjudicating what signal reaches conscious experience rather than... Nah, I don't think that's right. I think it's more fundamental than conscious experience. Let's get rid of that. So between the three players here, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the thalamus, what is the hierarchy? What is an effective hierarchy to... What is an effective hierarchy to walk through? That's kind of what I want to know here. Okay, one of the most debated topics in neuroscience. Where does the gate to consciousness actually sit? All right, right? Yeah, we don't really care about that, though. If you want to maintain your hierarchy of pre-conscious to conscious, you shouldn't put the thalamus inside adjudication. Instead, think of the thalamus as the sieve. Oh man, what does a sieve mean? I did the computer science sieve stuff, but okay, it's like this guy. And these are the deliberator. So the thalamus, the sieve. The thalamus should come before adjudication. It is the first major relay station. So adjudication happens after relay. So once the thalamus lets the signal through, these guys look at it through the lens of your internal state. So this is the result of the hierarchy. When the ACC determines that the conflict is too high for automatic resolution, it triggers top-down attention. Okay, so is it not the case that anything that makes it past the thalamus is necessarily conscious? It would require the level of precision weighting or the level of salience or however we want to describe what the anterior cingulate cortex is determining. No, the anterior cingulate cortex is just for conflict. What the amygdala or anterior cingulate cortex is determining and what is this? The ventromedial prefrontal cortex weighs the expected value of each and decides, which I imagine are in close communication with the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Okay, yeah, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex as opposed to the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. The VMPFC is like the in-between of of like these, more limbic system types and the higher cortical processes. So it's like in between the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and where would the anterior cingulate cortex be though? I think that would be lower. Right. Yeah, that would be lower. So it would be. Okay, let's just see what is responded to with this guy. Slow and steady. Thaw the moose, thalamus. I see. Very nice. Thalamus, crying face. Thalamus is what makes us conscious. It should be thalamus, smiley face. Okay. This is a common misconception, but the answer is a firm no. Simply making it past the thalamus does not guarantee conscious awareness. Okay, so you don't require ignition in order to reach the consciousness, but the thalamus must be particularly important for that type of process. Right, modern neuroscience, particularly predictive coding and global neuronal workspace theory, views the brain as a massive pre-conscious processing plant. The thalamus is just the first filter. There are several checkpoints after it where a signal can be discarded or processed entirely in the dark. The cortical dark zone, much of the processing in the primary sensory cortices, where the thalamus sends its data, remains unconscious. For example, your visual cortex is constantly processing the edges and shadows of everything in your periphery. But unless the data is deemed salient, it never triggers the ignition required for you to see it consciously. So the signal reaches the cortex, but it lacks the amplitude or reentrant feedback. Right, this is where your mention of precision weighting comes in. The brain assigns a weight to certain signals. Okay, so it's still leveraged. So then the other question is, right, the stuff that we saw yesterday was that when the hippocampus is firing off your short-term memory, unconsciously, perhaps during sleep, that it's still using the thalamus, I believe. Let's make sure that this is right. When the hippocampus fires off your short-term memory or whatever activity comes from your short-term memory, perhaps when you're at rest or during sleep, I'm guessing that it is still using the thalamus to spread this data far and wide, even though it's not firing at the right rate or in the right patterns to have this information be conscious. Hello? Oh, that's a bummer. Oh! Lost connection. That's lame. Alright, take two. Can I say the exact same thing I just said? When the hippocampus is firing off short-term memory so that you remember it over time, perhaps when you're at rest or during sleep, is it leveraging the thalamus for communication, even though it's sending information at a much faster rate than is necessary for conscious experience?
Yes, the hippocampus does interact with other brain regions, including the thalamus, during memory consolidation, especially during sleep. Even though conscious experience operates more slowly, memory consolidation processes can run at much higher frequencies. During deep sleep, for example, the hippocampus replays memories in coordination with cortical areas, and the thalamus is part of that network. So yes, even at a faster rate, that communication is leveraged.
So I know that the thalamus is somewhat of a filter for information. You could describe it as a sieve or a sieve. And my question is, does this filter function during this crystal memory consolidation process?
Yes, the thalamus still plays a filtering role even during memory consolidation. While you're asleep or at rest, the thalamus helps coordinate the flow of information between the hippocampus and the cortex. It essentially gates sensory input and modulates signals. During consolidation, this filtering helps prioritize the replay of relevant memory traces, ensuring that important information is strengthened.
So could you do something after the memory was actually first instantiated that will affect how the memory is consolidated later on? So perhaps you do something later in the day that's going to now affect how that memory is integrated into more consolidated memory during the night.
Absolutely. The consolidation of a memory isn't set in stone the moment it's formed. Things you do later, like revisiting related information, reflecting, or even having emotional experiences tied to that memory, can shape how it's consolidated. This is often referred to as reconsolidation. The brain can strengthen, alter, or even weaken aspects of a memory based on what happens after the initial encoding.
All right, very cool. Good March read, maybe. Oh, I want to get it soon. Ooh, The Elephant and the Blind. All right, The Experience of Pure Consciousness, Philosophy, Science, and 500 plus experiment. Oh, we know Thomas Metzinger, right? Experiential Reports. What if our goal had not been to land on Mars, but in pure consciousness? The experience of pure consciousness, what does it look like? What is the essence of human consciousness? So I think that the idea of pure consciousness is already like a... I think that is like an inappropriate concept. Like, even if you can, through meditation and practice, you can change your conscious experience, it would be inappropriate to describe one of these experiences as pure. I think we are always... the way that the only way to describe consciousness as pure is that everyone is always dealing with pure consciousness, provided they are conscious, and we can just determine what constitutes that level of consciousness. But I don't think we should be exclusionary on pure here. Buddhists agree. Nice. It is just obscured. Well, this is, yeah, I don't know if I would use obscured to describe it, because I would say at all time, like, I wouldn't want to use obscured in the same way I don't want to use pure. I don't want to use obscured. I think everyone's consciousness is equally obscured in the sense that we are all just conscious. Now, you could say that this all comes down to believing that like a certain conscious experience is more pure or more or less obscured than other experiences, and that's something I don't think we something we need to be careful about, because then it like implies that there is like a pure conscious experience to be had in like a fundamental sense. Now, granted, obviously we know that we can change our brain through these types of practices, and we can describe certain end states to be more beneficial than others, but I don't like saying it's more beneficial. Like, we want to keep it in that practical lens. Like, it's a beneficial or it's a positive mental state to be in. It's not necessarily like objectively pure or objectively obscured, and we want to be just careful about that. Well, the word obscured is just a finger pointing to the moon. Oh, I'm not sure what that phrase means, but I like it. A finger pointing to the moon. No love for raccoons. What happened to the raccoons? We're voice chatting. Expensive. Oh, is the book expensive? I'm sorry. I'm just being pedantic with the wording. Okay, drawing on large psychometric study of meditators, they found focused on pure awareness and meditation, the simplest form of experience there is to illuminate the most fundamental aspects of consciousness. The brain and illusions of self all interact. Oh, how they all interact. Starting with an exploration of existential ease and encoding a culture of consciousness. Oh, and ending on a culture of consciousness. Metzinger explores the increasingly non-egoic experiences of silence, wakefulness, and clarity. Yeah, this would be cool to read. From there, we should come up with like a list perhaps of books, and then maybe we do a day where we vet and we figure out which ones would be ideal. It is $55 though. Yeah, chances are. What was I going to say here? I don't know if we're going to do like a book club, but I mean, I guess we could. I would find a way to acquire the book without spending that much money. I'm not going to say how, but perhaps we could all do that. I'm not sure. Find a way. Common East metaphor words describing experience are like a finger pointing to the moon, and the experience is the moon. Ah, I see. So it's like always pointing away. But you do see language like everyone is already enlightened, samsara and nirvana are one. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to like try to talk about things without, like, it's hard to talk about these fundamental ideas without using words. It's not just hard; it's impossible. But the difficulty is to make it clear that that's what you're doing. Words are just the way we articulate. Always separate and of a different nature and mistaken for the moon itself. Right. That's funny that they would view the moon in that way, because it was always like this other thing. That's pretty cool though. All right, what were we at here? Right, we got the cortical dark zone, right? This is where your mention of precision weighting comes in. The brain assigns a weight, often mediated by acetylcholine and dopamine, to certain signals. If the weight is too low, the signal is treated as noise and ignored by the higher order adjudication systems. Okay. Then we got the amygdala, the ACC, and ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the salience network. You're exactly right that these three are in constant high-speed communication. They form what is often called the salience network. And that's what we're describing as adjudication here. Okay, so the ACC is pretty cool here. All right, so what do we miss? These were things to add, right? Or oh no, okay. This is a little ahead. The evaluator, deep pre-conscious. The ACC, the referee, right? Conflict and ignition. This is the result of the hierarchy. So then we get conscious experience. This is the result. When the ACC determines the conflict is too high for automatic resolution, it triggers top-down attention. The signal is broadcast to the rest of the brain. You suddenly become conscious of the craving and the conflict. You're no longer on autopilot. You are now deliberating. Okay. And this is the view of recurrent loops. This leads information to be shared. This leads to information being shared. Okay, and then what was before this? What needs to be added? The insula, right, okay. So we had adjudication, conflict, we had global workspace, conscious experience, internalization, hippocampus, and long-term memory. And then we have a critical addition, the insula, the seat of the self. If you want to be truly modern, you should include the insula for interpreting feelings. While the vagus nerve brings the data up, the insula is the specific part of the brain that integrates those signals into feelings. Modern neuroscience, like Lisa Feldman Barrett and Antonio Damasio, argues that you don't just have a heartbeat. You don't just have a heartbeat. The insula creates a representation of your body state. This is the bridge between the homeostatic and the conscious experience. So does it make sense to talk about the insula in the allostasis part? Since the insula, okay, nice. The insula takes in priors, and that's what's actually affecting how it, I mean, not only will it affect what it outputs, regardless of the bottom-up information, but it's going to affect the trajectory of how the bottom-up information constrains or controls, you could say, the outputs that are happening, or whatever the processing is happening within the insula. Okay, the insula needs to happen in this learned reflexes and allostasis. So we have to go through these topics like really quickly, actually, because the mechanics of autopilot is actually just one. It's supposed to be one subsection. We haven't touched this at all, but we're gonna have to replace it. We're gonna move it here before motion regulation. Never easy when you're attempting to make a flow chart of how the mind and body interacts, right? Yep. And we're trying to do this just in the most accessible way we possibly could. And we're doing this only for the reason of pointing out how automatic behaviors are, like the mechanisms behind automatic behaviors. But then we're immediately after that, we're going into the much more interesting like interpretations of what this results in. So, you know, the heuristics that our body and brain are operating off of. I guess this is all talking at a little more of a higher level processing lens. Yep. Affect, salience, biases. Right, yeah, these are now like, given what we just talked about, these are like the biases and heuristics that are really driving our thinking, our decision making, how we experience the world. And then we can get to systemic biases. We can get to all these types of heuristics. The question is, does it make sense to have these separate? I think it does. I haven't looked at this in like a week or so, but Oh man, got a lot going on here. Part 2 is going to be a unit. All right, we've got a great meme. Oh, can I not see this? Oh, there we go. Pointing at the moon, pointing creates the pointer, and nice, and worships it. Very cool. Very nice. I wonder if there's a good analogy for anything we're doing where we're worshiping the wrong thing. If we could, AI training would be so much easier to code. Oh, if we could understand the brain in that way. Kind of. I think the brain doesn't operate in the same way that we want our AI to operate in. I meant the flow chart. And like vice versa. Now, granted, I think that people are realizing that if they want a AI that is more human-like in the way that we can be more, general, intelligent, then you need to start building out these types of systems like salient systems and competing drives and some form of state, which is difficult. All right, I'm going to call it on that one then, and then we can go to this guy. I have a stream deck, and I want the ability to set a marker during a stream such that I can easily find the markers after the fact. What is the best way of doing this? Setting markers via the stream deck is a standard workflow for editors who want to skip the scrubbing through hours of footage phase. The best way depends on whether you want the markers to live in your recording software, your streaming platform, or directly in your video editor. Aha. So the OBS method, best for local recordings. If you are recording locally while streaming, you want markers embedded in the file or a sidecar text file. Okay. This is the gold standard for OBS. It creates a simple text file with timestamps every time you press a hotkey. That's cool. I like that. If you only care about highlights, you can set the replay buffer to save the last 60 seconds. This creates a separate mini clip of the moment. So we don't want that, but the platform method, best for Twitch/YouTube. If you want these markers to show up on your VOD dashboard or be visible to your editors via the API. So I don't think this is helping me right now. We've got stream markers and we got markers on YouTube. Into the live control room. All right, the NLE method, best for edit-ready markers. If you want to press a button on your Stream Deck and have it appear on a timeline in Adobe Premiere or DaVinci Resolve while you're recording, we've got marker to file. Some advanced users use a Stream Deck. I've been saying Steam Deck, I think. Stream Deck button to trigger a script that writes a CSV or XML file. DaVinci Resolve remote markers. If you use a specialized tool like the timecode systems, you can sync live markers, but for most creators, this is overkill. Stick to the Info Writer plugin for OBS and import those timestamps. Info Writer. I use DaVinci, and I really just need to yeah, I use DaVinci, and I would just want to see the marker in my cutting interface. Alright, if you want the markers to appear directly on your DaVinci Resolve timeline after a stream, the most efficient and free workflow involves using a specialized OBS plugin called OBS Marker, where the info writer method combined with an EDL. Since Resolve can't listen to your stream deck while it is minimized background during a stream, you need a way to bridge the gap between OBS and Resolve. The most integrated method is OBS Marker EDL export. Cleanest way is to generate an EDL file. Resolve can import these files instantly to populate your time. That's perfect. Install the OBS Marker plugin. Stream up. Okay, what is OBS Marker if we're not able to find this immediately? Plugin. OBS. Should I have looked that up? Marker plugin. Is it literally just this? Stream up? Okay, we've got all kinds of plugins here. We're not able to sort by downloads, descending. Okay, marker. We're looking for marker. Nope. Prefix. All right, let me just go marker. Ah. Man, these are rough. This is probably not optimal. This guy's got a lot of downloads, 42K. This one's got 400K. Ooh. All right, let's do one more OBS Marker plugin. Let's see what's going on here. We've got info writers, got a lot more downloads and views. What else can we find here? Has a featured add markers.
The beautiful
Oh, maybe I should have just watched this first.
OBS developers just released a new beta for OBS 30.2 that answers some wants that I've had going on for
Yikes.
7 years now with OBS. While this is functionally by no means a huge update compared to others we have covered, well, maybe it kind of is. It's some of the most excited I have been for an update in a long time. First and foremost, the biggest for me. The MP4 container for recording is changing again, but for a good reason. This time it's a hybrid MP4 feature that has V-files, literal notepad guys, so there's the possibility that Elgato would show in your editor whenever it's a raid or a cool game.
Okay, hotkeys. That's what we're looking for here. We've got add chapter marker, right? That's what we're looking for. Add chapter marker kill. Oh, did they add that themselves? Okay, marker. Am I going insane here? Oh, okay, we just got the one. Add chapter marker. Okay.
Game clip to clip or whatever. Lots of potential will explode from this. Rodney working with customizable options through StreamerBot and Stream Deck as well. Had to add markers to your streamers and creators long last. Them to to another moments to clip or in and out points to edit from and save more markers via bit, but it is MP4 container for recording is changing again, but for a good reason. This time it's a hybrid MP4 feature that has the recoverable goodness that the fragmented MP4 format from recent updates gave us, but it is still safe and compatible with various video editors like
More downloads could mean it's been around much longer. Right, which is usually good, though I guess it could be older in that sense. It could be perhaps less updated.
regular old MP4. And the big one I've been trying to get a plugin to replicate for like 7 years now, you can insert chapter markers via a hotkey that will show up in Resolve and Premiere and other video editors. Yes, no more spreadsheets, notepad documents,
Nice.
CSV files, literal notepads. You can set up a hotkey or a Stream Deck button to add markers to your stream VOD for special moments to clip or in and out points to edit from and save hours in editing, or to send them to another editor and save them hours and tons of headache. At long last.
Wow.
This is truly game-changing. I think this will help revolutionize workflows for streamers and creators for many years to come. This is available in the usual OBS API, so there's the possibility that Elgato or someone could develop a tool that detects when you change games or other things like that to add markers to your stream, you know, based on a lot of dynamic changes. Elgato, I'm pretty sure, is already working on integrating with the Stream Deck, and Nutty has already gotten it working with customizable options through StreamerBot and Stream Deck as well. Lots of potential will explode from this. Rodney has put out a beta plugin for this update that lets you set up different hotkeys for named markers, so you can have it show in your editor whenever it's array options
who
through
was this?
StreamerBot and Stream Deck as well. Lots of potential will explode from this. Rodney has put out a beta plugin for this update that lets you set up different hotkeys for named markers, so you can have it show in your editor whenever it's a raid or
Rodney. Okay, was that one of these? No? This is what? Okay, this is very long ago. So we don't need that. This is semi-recent, so this could be using that. For creating and tracking chapter markers in your recordings. Since creating content on multiple platforms is important. Alright. Chapters, current chapter. I don't know. And then what else do I want to find out? I want to look up Stream Deck plugins and then see if maybe there's a OBS marker Stream Deck plugin. Am I going crazy right now? Does this already have markers? Oh, wow. I think I already have this. All right, well, this is going to be a lot easier than I thought. So, hell yeah. All right, we can skip over that. What are we at? 2 hours, 8 minutes. Let's see if we could do this in like a very short amount of time. We want to do the ask, summarize. Just a pre-existing feature you didn't know existed? Absolutely. Well, I'm not like too versed in any of this stuff, despite the fact that I'm streaming on almost a year and a half, maybe two years coming up. So, no excuses, but all right. Represents a talk by that on quantum Bayesianism and the concept of the embodied agent. The talk is divided into 3 parts, starting with the motivation for formalizing agents and cubism. Argues that formalizing agents is necessary to understand their world and that the world of agents can be understood by abstracting the agents away. Cubism views quantum theory as a tool for decision making where the wave function describes an agent's probability assignments for future experiences. Okay, that's one way we could go about this. Uses the analogy of that tale to illustrate that understanding the tool also requires understanding the agent using it. Okay. That's not too crazy. Concept of abstraction is introduced as a constructive process to derive an objective understanding of the world from subjective experiences. Okay, intersubjectivity. To abstract away the agent, it's crucial to understand intersubjectivity, the relationship between agents. Sharing experience Doesn't require linguistic communication, but a deeper pre-linguistic connection. Sharing is non-identification. Individual experiences remain unique. Comparing experiences directly is impossible due to the lack of an external viewpoint. The act of sharing experiences fundamentally depends on the agents having bodies and being in a similar predicaments. Okay, this is all fine. Body plays a role in how we experience and how experiences are shaped by sensory motor capabilities. Yep. Other agents are experienced as living bodies in shared physical space. Recognized as sharing similar abstract situations, right? Localization and determination are introduced to explain the split between action and result in cubism, both tied to the body. Merleau-Ponty's idea of the body schema suggests that a shared, undifferentiated body schema precedes the differentiation of my body versus other. Okay, this is all fine. Two agents can share an experience if their bodies are relatively similar and situated in the same way relative to the phenomenon. Okay. I feel like this has all just been saying the same stuff over and over again. Where's the actual cubism, though? Argues that understanding the quantum world through cubism requires acknowledging the role of agents and their bodies, which act as a carrier bags of agency or placeholders that any agent could occupy. I guess I get, like, all that stuff was real easy to commit to or agree with, but how does this relate to quantum physics? How does cubism connect scientific and philosophical implications of embodied cognition, which you can assume I'm fine with, to quantum theory? That's the question. To quantum mumbo jumbo land. It serves as a bridge between the physical rigor of quantum mechanics and the philosophical frameworks of embodied cognition by reframing the quantum state not as a description of an external reality, but as a tool for an embodied agent. All right. The wave function is often treated as a physical object or a law of nature. Cubism rejects this. It asserts that... So this is somewhat similar to relational quantum mechanics. It asserts that quantum mechanics is a user's manual, a normative framework that an agent uses to navigate their environment. The Born rule isn't a law governing how atoms move. It is an addition to personal probability theory. It guides an agent on how to update their expectations based on past experience. Okay, this is kind of crazy. I don't think I think I would much prefer to go with relational quantum mechanics, and even that one we had trouble with. Called it. Yeah, I don't know how you can justify this. How can you justify this connection to our understanding of a physical world? It seems like RQM would be a much more coherent path to an assault on some static, true reality, physical reality. This one seems to conflate our experience with the quantum behavior that we measure through our empirical experience. I don't know. In my view, cubism relatively more closely aligns with Occam's razor. Oh man, I gotta look up Occam's razor now. is a problem-solving principle stating that the simplest explanation with the fewest assumptions is usually the best. Right, but you can't just go with the simpler one if it doesn't abide by more complex, or like by the rules that just happen to be complex. Like you have to abide by the rules that are there. So I would say that it's because I'm taking these rules to be really important, then it wouldn't actually be the straightforward answer. Okay, is the primary battleground between cubism and relational quantum mechanics? You're suggesting that RQM offers a more coherent assault on a static reality because it keeps the focus on physical systems and their relations, whereas cubism risks collapsing into a cognitive or psychological conflation. To justify the cubist connection to the physical world, we have to look at how it treats the subject-object boundary differently than RQM. So the fundamental difference lies in what the theory is actually about. So RQM asserts that all physical variables only have values relative to another physical system. It is a third-person ontology. It says system A has value X relative to system B. It seeks a world of relations that exists even if no mind is present. Right. That seems fine. Like, it's just in a way you can interpret quantum mechanics, and it abides by everything we know about the physical world, as well as everything we know about the physical matter that makes up humans and neural processes and whatnot. But this one asserts that the quantum state is a first-person tool. It isn't describing a relation between two inanimate objects. It is describing the consequences of an agent's action upon the world. So the issue with this one is now you have to act as if consciousness or you as the perceiver is a singular thing. Whereas all that we've been discussing about consciousness this entire time is that consciousness is not like a singular thing. It's not a singular event. It seems to be, first of all, very difficult to pin down. We can't find that atom of experience. But it's a bunch of matter that we can describe as occurring within at least the bounds of your body, but then obviously the embodied cognition people that deal with extended cognition would say that even that your experience is extended past the physical bounds of your body. And it just depends how you want to interpret that. All right, the justification, they argue that experience is not a mental add-on to physics. It is the only point of contact we have with the physical world. What? How is this not like a contradiction here? That we have, it's asserting some sort of dualism. By grounding the theory in the agent's experience, cubism avoids the view from nowhere that RQM still implicitly chases. In an embodied framework, you cannot separate the knower from the known. Cubism simply accepts this as a mathematical constraint. All right, I think we have to run. We have to get out of here. I don't know. Unfortunately, we can't even entertain this stuff. Even though it is interesting, in a sense. Tastes salty versus looks salty. Versus acts salty. We can cut this one. And then I think we're calling it a day here. And then what are we doing tomorrow? What's tomorrow? Taking recommendations. We're having fun. Briefly look at how humans acquired their ability to be intelligent in the way that we intuit 60,000 years ago, such that we couldn't teach earlier humans modern culture. My friend told me this, and I'm very curious to look it up. Read through recent r/philosophy posts. So, yeah, unless we get other recommendations, this is going to be what we're going to be doing. And we'll also be looking at videos. We got to watch the new GACT videos. We got to indulge in that. And I will deal with this later. This is going to be SRD, which means I need to incorporate it into the Stammerson document at a later date. And then hopefully I set up that marker stuff by tomorrow. To my understanding, some theoretical physicists believe in cubism, so in my view, it's a scientifically defensible position. It might be like a physicist defensible position, but I don't think it's a physics plus neuroscience defensible position. I mean, we could also just point out that I really didn't give like a comprehensive argument as to why it's not defensible, and you're in a position where you could either take my word or trust in a scientist. So I don't know why you'd trust in my word versus the scientist. So it is defensible that you even have that position. So I can't blame you for having that position. I don't think that. I'll say even though I always say we here. I don't think that I can justify spending time entertaining that, just given all the stuff that we've talked about. And perhaps I've made a sufficient argument for why that is. Perhaps it's like an argument that you all can intuit, given all the stuff I've said over all the time that I've been on this channel. Hopefully all that stuff adds up to something that is somewhat sufficient. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to, sufficiently justify all these intuitions I have. And it's certainly not going to be important for the document. So have to evaluate the various justifications, right? All right, I'm going to call it there. Thanks for everyone who tuned in and chatted and lurked and chilled. Thank you, Choff1, for the for the terminal vocalizer. And yeah, have a good rest of the day.